Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Secondhand Watchworks. My name is Nick, and if it's your first time joining us on this channel, what we do here is we restore vintage watches, which is a hobby that I'm absolutely obsessed with, and I really hope that you'll enjoy this video, so thanks for watching. Let's dive right in. All right, so on the bench today we have a vintage Tissot Seastar Seven from, I believe, the 1960s, and it's nice, but it's a little bit rough around the edges. You can see there's like a really worn crown here. And you may notice that the crystal is broken. So why is the crystal broken? Well, I'm an idiot, and I wanted to kind of have a look around in there before starting filming. And then, of course, if you look at the back of this watch, it does tell you that you need a special tool to open it. It says use key number 315T, which, of course, I do not have. And I knew that this is a front loader, so you need to take out the crystal to be able to remove everything inside. So I used my regular crystal lift, which is usually better for expansion crystals, which this is not. This has a tension ring. So now can't get the movement out of the case because there's a piece of broken crystal in there. So we'll have to address that. Before we really open this thing up and try to pry the broken crystal off, let's take a look at how it's doing on the Timegrapher. So it's actually doing pretty good, actually. Somebody must have regulated this recently because it's keeping almost perfect time, 0 seconds a day. The amplitude is very low, though. I would expect that to be more like 250 degrees, and that's the range that the balance wheel swings. And then the beat error is by how much it's off, essentially side to side. So this thing is not running really well. So we'll have to take it apart. So let's first remove the hands. We use this silicone sheet here to protect the dial. And I like to store them in these little membrane boxes to make sure they don't get banged up while we work on the watch. All right, so let's try our luck here. We'll see if just light tapping will help. Nah. Okay, so you can see the broken crystal all around the bezel there, and it's being held under tension by the tension ring. Tension ring is doing its job, right? It's preventing the crystal from just falling out. So I had to kind of mess around with this for quite a while, just prying. And then I found here what I think is like the best way, which is I'm just kind of like digging a bit of a hole here into one part of the crystal with steel tweezers. And eventually I was able to lift up a part of the ring. And okay, so it didn't want to come out, but at least I have somewhere that I can start prying. So I'm confident I should be able to get this off here. Just very carefully. There we go. Perfect. All right, so now the ring is come loose. I was really worried I would slip and either scratch the dial or damage the case or even the tension ring, because we'll have to reuse that. And see, the whole thing came out all at once. So that's a relief. All in one piece. So we'll start by taking out the tension ring. I just want to inspect that, make sure it's not damaged or broken, and it looks like it's okay, because we'll have to likely reuse that. New crystals, of this type actually do come with a tension ring, but this one might be a different size. Whoa, look at this thing. So that's an interesting color. Very tarnished. Doesn't look like there's any plating left, if there ever was any, but this is basically, it looks like bare brass, which of course will always tarnish quickly with age. All right, so the whole movement, as well as the case inside, has got like a whole bunch of scratches. You see these scratches there, those are watchmakers' marks. Basically, whenever somebody would service a movement back in the day, they would put their mark in there. Okay, that's terrible. So, okay, so, all right, so the dial is okay. I could have really scratched it up here. These universal movement holders are, they're very versatile. They're great, but sometimes you got to be careful they don't hold the movements as tight as we think they do. So first thing we got to do is remove those screws here for the case clamps, because there's a big plastic movement ring holding the movement, and those are there because Tissot and many other watch brands, they reuse their movement families, to fit multiple different types of cases and watches, and so the ring is just there to make up for the extra space so the movement isn't wobbling about. I have another Tissot of this period, and it uses pretty much the same family of movement as well, and it's a very, very different case. All right, so the ring should come out very carefully here. Now, there's a bit of a crack there. I'll have to be careful not to break that. So looking around this movement, you may notice there aren't any dial screws. It does have dial feet. As you can see, there's one sticking through here, but this uses nylon sleeves to hold the ring under tension. So you just have to gently pry it and it comes off. Nice and simple design. Nice dial too. All right, so we're going to start by taking off the hour wheel, just because it's loose and it's going to fall on its own. And what I want to do here before I keep moving forward is I want to stop the watch. I want to remove the balance wheel. That's the big wheel that oscillates back and forth, and that's what's responsible for keeping the timing on the watch. It oscillates essentially, like 18,000 times an hour, and it has like very delicate parts. So I'm just releasing the tension on the mainspring here, just holding the ratchet wheel. And this ratchet wheel is connected to the mainspring barrel underneath, and that's where you have all of the power of the watch basically come from. It's like a big, long spring, and I'll show it to you when we disassemble this. But effectively, when we release the tension there, the balance eventually will come to a stop, and we can more safely remove it. And it's just one screw there. So I like to just pry the bridges very gently. These are like a tight fit on there. They have these posts, basically, and they're really tight fit. So I don't want to yank on it. And typically what we do is we just lift up. And you can see the wheel is kind of stuck there. And you may see the very fine blue hairspring there. You don't want to stretch that. It's the end of the spring. If you damage that, it's very much a pain to fix. And if you can't fix it, you have to replace the whole balance complete. So we're going to store that away. So now I must apologize. I'm using a new phone to film here, and it's kind of having some difficulties, with the macro shots, and I lost the footage of me removing the ratchet wheel, which is on the left of that there. But no worries, we'll show it to you when we reassemble it. So now I'm just removing the crown wheel, which has got these two offset screws here, very tiny screws. I'm going to make sure not to lose those. And loads of scratches on this movement. I see somebody has quote-unquote worked on this before, maybe with a butcher's knife or something. Lots of wear underneath this. I'm going to have to address that. We'll probably put a bit of grease there under the wheel. And see that this is what my camera was doing. So, but I promise it's the last time it did it. We'll figure this out. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to remove this little click spring here gently. And we're holding it here with my second hand so it doesn't fly away, which it will. All of these wire springs you very quickly learn to treat with respect. Because otherwise you end up on the floor with a flashlight and a magnet, and you get acquainted with the floorboards trying to find them again. So now we can remove these big beefy screws, and those basically hold the train of wheel bridge in place. And when we lift this up, it'll reveal the wheels, all of the gears basically that keep on spinning. It's a clever design of ratios, going from the barrel all the way down through the train. This was the second hand wheel. This is the third wheel here. And we might as well remove the pallet forks there because that's very delicate, both the pivot as well as the stone. So like a slip of the screwdriver here, you can do some damage on a pallet forks. And if you dislodge one of the stones, you got to like re-shellac it in place, re-glue it in place essentially with a resin. I don't have much experience with that yet. And of course the pivots are really tiny, so both the balance as well as the pallet forks, we treat them like with a special amount of respect. I put them in their own little cubby in the parts tray, which I'll show you, and I clean them separately as well. So let's remove the pallet fork cock here and the pallet forks. Really interesting, really clever part. I'll show you when we reassemble and lubricate this how it works. If you haven't seen that, it's really, really clever. It swings back and forth basically with the balance as well as the escape wheel. All that is the escapement, and that controls how much essentially it's allowing the watch to release the tension of the mainspring, keeping time. I'm noticing these screws are a little bit different here. One of them is round, one of them is flat. So what I'm guessing happened here is the last person that worked on this movement must have lost one of the screws here for the center wheel bridge and just replaced it with, you know, like a spare screw. And I mean, it does the job, and it's a hidden screw, so I really don't mind it. So now the escape wheel can come out. And the center wheel bridge, I'm really careful because, you know, again, it's really tight on those posts. I don't want to just pry from one side and kind of like introduce any kind of like weird force on this. There we go. Got it. It's not too dirty. Doesn't look like there's too much dirt in there or dried oil. This is the sliding clutch, and I'm missing a piece here, the winding pinion. Where's that? Oh, there it is. It just fell through the watch. Oh, there you go. This thing does not want to stay put. There we go. Usually that's stuck to the sliding pinion there. And now we can take out the barrel bridge. Another beefy screw there, same as the bridge screws. And at first I thought, oh, I'm missing a screw here. But no, there's a longer click spring screw that kind of does double duty and actually goes through the bridge and acts as the second barrel bridge screw there. Got to remember that. It's because they're not the same screw. Okay, so now the barrel should be free. And then we can lift it up, and lots of scratches again. Like, how does someone do that? Almost looks like it's intentional. And the center wheel, of course, won't be able to come out because it's attached to the motion works on the other side via the cannon pinion. See, those are the nylon sleeves I was telling you about that hold the dial in place. So now on the dial side, we have to remove this little cover plate here. Again, tiny screws. And this plate basically just holds two wheels. It holds that intermediate wheel. That's kind of like that gold-colored wheel there, the bigger one. This one. And then the setting wheel that connects the keyless works with the rest of the motion works. Now this part in the middle there, that's called the cannon pinion. So that's friction fit in place. So we have to use, well, you can use many different tools. You can use tweezers even, but it's a little bit risky. But what you want to do is you want to apply a bit of force here and lift straight up, which this tool is designed just for this purpose. And you see the part just fell down. So the cannon pinion, the reason it's fitted this way is it's the part that's able to kind of slip up away from the rest of the movement as you're setting the time manually. So it's holding on to the rest of the movement as the watch is running to make sure that the hands are keeping time, but it allows for slip if you're setting the time. Look at this. You see this scratch there? It looks like somebody went in and put in their initials there. I don't know why somebody would do that, especially given how much damage is on the inside of this movement there. How many scratches. Not something to be proud of. I wouldn't sign my name to this. All right, the setting lever spring can come off. We're in the keyless works now, which is what operates the crown. And we have to, again, wire spring here, yoke spring, treat it with respect. We're holding it. Especially this one. This one is really strong, relatively speaking, and it will fly far. A little bit tricky here to pick up. Come on. All right. All right, next the yoke can come out. Yeah, it's a little bit, it's like I might need to dress my tweezers here or sharpen them. Having difficulty picking up those flat pieces. So Rodico to the rescue. Rodico is like this, it's kind of like Play-Doh. Really sticky like Play-Doh for watchmakers, and it does a ton of different things. You can mop up oil with it. Now the center wheel can come out. So and it can hold parts in place. You can use it to clean. There's all of the parts from the movement. And to finish taking this apart, we have to disassemble the mainspring. Oops. All right. What you have to do is just press down here on the edges, and then the lid is going to pop out. And I'm carefully using tweezers here to hold the mainspring in place because it's a strong spring with a lot of tension, and you don't want it to jump out and hit you in the face. And you can see in the middle, the part there that we're trying to remove is called the arbor. And that does two things, essentially. It hooks on to the, it's difficult to take out. It hooks on to the center part of the mainspring, allowing it to be wound. And it's also the two pivots for the barrel. So now I'm just kind of walking out the spring here very carefully because we've left the barrel arbor in there. And I don't want it to be launched across the room. It just didn't want to come out, especially with those tweezers. So no worries, we could just press it out once the spring is out. So now what I'm doing here, and I'm accelerating the footage because you may have seen this on a lot of my other videos where I covered this in greater detail. But I like to pre-clean all of the parts, not all the parts really, but all of the dirty parts like the mainspring barrel. We're going to clean the bridges, the main plates, and all the wheels essentially. Anywhere where grease or oil might have been applied, because that oil and grease would have hardened by now. And of course, then we put everything into these mesh baskets because it's going to go into a proper cleaning process in the ultrasonic. And I'm using all these little baskets to keep the part systems together with their own screws. You know, that helps keep them together so we don't mix them up. One final step before we put this through the cleaning is we have to peg the jewels there. So we use a bit of a pegwood that we whittled to a point, and then you just kind of try to burnish off any dirt or dried grease or oil from all of the jeweled pivots and the arbor hole as well. And it's just given it the best chance to clean up really, really nice. Don't want any dirt left over. And then we just put this spinning basket together, including, yes, the mainspring here carefully. Because it looks fine, we're going to reuse this mainspring. There we go. So basically what I do is I don't have a watch cleaning machine. I use a drill, and I use a 4 mason jar system. You can see how it spins. And you notice how the cavitation, a bubble from the ultrasonic, actually goes through the mason jar. So it does really good cleaning. And of course, after we clean, we got to rinse 3 times. And while the parts are drying here, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning the pallet forks as well as the balance wheel. And as we mentioned several times already, these are very delicate, so they get cleaned separately. And I use a solution called One Dip, which is really, really aggressive at loosening up grease and dirt and all that. And we're going to take the opportunity to clean those little wire springs as well, which I won't put into the wash baskets because they tend to get stuck in the mesh, which is a real pain. So now for the pallet forks, I'm basically using a Q-tip with some solvent, and I'm gently, carefully rubbing the impulse planes. And those are the 2 flat planes that basically will get some grease, specialized grease when we assemble it. So we want to make sure that none of that old grease is left on there. And then from the mainspring, we don't touch the hairspring at all. I said mainspring, I meant the hairspring on the balance. Basically, we just agitate the fluid there with some bubbles, help loosen up any dirt, and then we have to dry it. I'm being very careful there because if you blow too hard on it, the wheel can actually go flying, and then you can bend the hairspring. So again, here, just drying the other pivot underneath. All right, so we can take a look at the case now. Again, this ring was snapped there, a little bit cracked, so we'll have to be careful. But the rest of the case basically looks fairly clean. I mean, this is a very simple case because it's just one piece, right? There's no separate case back. And it doesn't look very dirty. There's a bit of crud here between the lugs, so we can use pegwood to help loosen that before we put it into the ultrasonic. Pegwood is like the most versatile thing along with Rodico because you can use it to clean, hold things, whatever you need to do, and it won't scratch anything. It's a really, really essential watchmaker's tool. A little bit around the edge here, just to make sure. And then what I do is typically we're going to clean this, I don't know, like 10, 12 minutes into the ultrasonic. I make sure that it's heated. And the detergent I use in there is just Dawn dish soap. Works really well. All right, so now the watch parts, the movement parts are clean and dried. I dry them into the food dehydrator here because we have to dry them as quickly as possible so there's no chance of them rusting. And then we have all of the clean parts here, all the movement, the case, the old tension ring from the crystal, which we may have to reuse, and then the spring. So now we can start reassembling this, but before, we're just going to put this under the microscope and inspect to make sure nothing's broken. So we take a look at all the jewels, making sure they're nice and clean. Any dirt whatsoever here is absolutely non-desirable because it can affect how well the watch will run. So I'm looking at all of the jewels here. So you can see they're all really shiny. And there's that that mark there that somebody put in. It looks like somebody's initials. I've never seen that before. Somebody put their initials on the actual main plate. And then this is the balance cap jewel. We're going to take a look at that when we disassemble that and clean it separately after. And re-lubricate it. And this is the pallet forks there. I'm just making sure that those impulse planes are clean. The pivots are nice. The hairspring here is fine, and then it looks like all the pivots are okay. You know, and then we look at all the wheels and their pivots. We make sure that none of the teeth are missing. The pivots are nice and shiny. Right. Oh, look at that. A tiny, tiny fiber on the, I believe, the third wheel there. Or it might be the center. Yeah, that's the third wheel. This is like absolutely tiny. You can see like the tip of my tweezers there. Look huge. But that's enough. This little fiber is actually enough to cause issues. So we have to remove it. Now we're going to wind the mainspring back in here. I'm using a set of 3D printed mainspring winders. If you're interested about how they work in greater detail, I invite you to watch my other video where I did a full service on a Caravelle. I basically like spent a good 5 minutes explaining how these work and what works well with them and what doesn't. So now we have the mainspring fully wound into the tool. And all we have to do is press it into the barrel. And you can wind these in by hand, but it's really not the way. This is easier. There you go. So now it snaps into place. And all we have to do now is finish assembling the mainspring barrel. So we're going to put in the arbor. This one was a really tight fit. Ended up having to spend like a good 2-3 minutes getting it in place. So I apologize for the editing cuts there. But eventually we got it. I'm just making sure it's catching with the hole on the spring. And then what we're going to do is apply a bit of HP 1300 oil. That's the pink medium viscosity oil to the shoulder there where the arbor is going to meet the barrel lid. And then we use this, thankfully, very inexpensive tool to just kind of pop the, or clip the lid in place. There we go. So now the barrel's done. Hard part's done. At least for that. All right, so we can turn attention to the rest of the movement here. So we're applying a bit of that same oil, the 1300 oil, to the shoulder of the center wheel. And that goes in place like so. Very nice. Same oil here for the barrel arbor. Then you can see how these two interact with one another. So now we can put on the center wheel bridge. I did put a bit of oil on the shoulder of that pivot there on the center wheel before. And we're putting in the mismatched screws again. Whoop. There we go. Okay, so now the escape wheel can go on, and sometimes that's the most difficult one to align. Certainly when we put on the bridge there, and then the third wheel also has to find its pivot. And you know, like once it's in, like it just sits flat. Not quite. There we go. Nope, nope. There we go. Now it's fine. All right, and now the center seconds wheel, or the fifth wheel, I guess, can go on. And that uses a bit of 9010 oil. It's light viscosity because it's a fast-moving wheel. Essentially, that long pinion there that you saw is where the second's hand is attached to on the other side. And so that wheel will spin once every 60 seconds. So now we can put on the barrel bridge. And I haven't put the click screw in place just yet. I just wanted the barrel to be held in place while I put on the train of wheel bridge. So we have to carefully try to align all of the pivots. And I think I did a decent job here, but we still always have to just kind of, you know, play around with some of the wheels, make sure that they fall into their jewels, into their proper pivots. And, you know, typically the escape wheel, is always the last one, the trickiest one that's holding everything back. But it looks like we got it, so perfect. So we can now screw this down. Yeah, sorry, my fingers are kind of in the way there. I noticed after when I was editing the footage. There we go. And we can put on the click. So first, we're going to put on this little click spring here in place. And just before I put on like a little bit of 1300 oil where the click is going to pivot, it's because it is a friction part. All right, so now this click spring is in place. And then without delay, I don't like to just leave these sitting there. We're going to reassemble the rest. So the click is going to go in, and you can see that it's a relatively long screw because it doubles as the second screw for the barrel bridge. It's a different screw that allows it to move like this. All right, so now the ratchet wheel can go on. And we can screw it down here, and we'll have to hold it because you can see the whole thing wants to spin. So I'm just giving it a bit of a tighten here. And notice that wear that we were talking about. So I'm going to put some grease where I see some of the wear marks under the crown wheel. And then where the crown wheel is going to slip on that plate here, I put a little bit of 1300 oil to help it along as well. It's going to make the crown operation when we wind a little bit nicer, and it'll help prevent future wear. Whenever you have metal on metal kind of rubbing against each other, like it can cause some issues down the line with wear. All right, so now that's in place. Let's give it a spin here. And you can see the whole train spins really, really quickly. All right, so pallet forks can go in. It's kind of tricky to get it to find its bottom pivot there. It looks fine. And then the pallet fork cock can go on. And this one has got a lot to align there. It's got like 2 posts plus the 2 screws posts. So it fits in there really tightly. Again, my fingers are in the way. Sorry about that. All right, final screw there. And now you'll notice if I wind it, the train does not spin, and that's because it's now held by the pallet forks. See, I'm just checking it snaps back and forth there. And as the wheel, the balance wheel is going to oscillate, it'll interact with that pallet fork to kind of control the time there. So now that's the keyless works that we're putting back together. I put a little bit of grease there on that post for the setting lever. And next the winding pinion needs a little bit of grease on that clutch part there. where it's going to interact with the sliding clutch that we're putting in. Now, to assemble the rest, we have to put in the crown and stem. So there's a couple lubrication points on the stem, the tip there, all the square parts, a little bit on that part here, which is going to rub against the main plate, and then a little bit in the sides of that groove there, where the setting lever, I guess a retaining pin, will be sliding. And that's what's keeping the stem from just kind of coming out as you're pulling on it. So now we need to put a little bit of grease here on the sliding pinion, where it's going to interact with the yoke. That's the yoke post, then also the setting wheel post that we're just greasing a little bit here. So setting wheel can go on. Now it's got a flat side and a chamfered side. The chamfered side goes on the bottom. And now that's the yoke here. So that's kind of like a really simple lever. Basically, it interacts with the setting lever. And then as you're changing the crown positions, it's moving the sliding clutch in and out. So now the yoke spring can go back in very carefully. And we need to put a little bit of grease there where that spring meets the yoke, just to make sure it works well. And put a little bit too much. So again, you can use some Rodico to clean up some of the mess, some of the excess. Setting lever spring can now go in. And it's got like a big old screw here. And it looks like it's, let's see how it's working. Yeah, so it's working fine actually, which I expected. You know, it's a really simple part and nothing looked wrong with it. So we can grease a couple points there. This is where the cannon pinion is going to fit, which we can now click in place. It's friction fit. And you heard it click there. A little bit of 1300 oil on that post for the intermediate wheel, and I'm putting a little bit on that track there because it will slip against the wheel. Just want to prevent wear if we can. And now this little plate can go back on, holding those two wheels in place there, and it's only got the one screw. So now that that's on, we can show you how the whole thing works. Basically, when you're pulling on the crown, you're in time setting mode, like this. And so when you turn the crown, you can see you're turning. The whole motion works there all the way up to the cannon pinion. And if we push it back in, this is where you would wind the watch. Now, some people may be wondering, where does that oil come from? So we use these oil cups. This is the 9010 light viscosity, the pink 1300 medium viscosity. This one is a 9415. It's a specialized grease for the pallet forks. We're going to use that later. 8200 is just regular grease for, you know, for many things, and it's empty now. And then Monaco DX is the heavier grease for the big parts. And this is the where I keep the oilers into like kind of like a magic eraser type deal. And now I just realized I forgot to oil that part of the barrel arbor. So I had to take it apart, oil it, put it back in. That'll happen. Now we can, under the microscope, oil up the jewels. So we use two different kinds of oils there with those oilers. 9010 for the lighter viscosity for the faster moving wheels, like the center wheel, the escape wheel. And then 1300 for the barrel, the third wheel, a center wheel, and all that. So you can see how that pallet forks is clicking back in place. Now we can put a bit of that 9415 oil. And then we'll just make sure that it's distributed, and we'll make some adjustment. And I do typically add more as well. All right, so now this balance wheel was a bit of a challenge to put back in place. Some of them just kind of fall in place. This one, no kidding, I spent like 5-10 minutes just trying to get it right. It just would not find its bottom pivot. So now really being careful here about putting this in. And you can see this thing just wants to go. So, so that's good. That's a really good sign. And even though it's going, the bridge itself is not fully in there. It's like a really tight fit with the post. So I have to gently press it down, and now we can finally screw it securely in place. All right, so we got to oil those cab jewels there. So this is the one from the main plate, and I have a bit of PTSD with those springs there. So I'm being very careful when we open them. I did break one months ago, and you remember that. So now we clean the end stones there. And you want them shiny like this. Super, super clean. Then we apply a tiny drop of 9010 oil right in the center. You want it to cover about, 50% of the surface of the stone. And then we can put on the whole jewel there. Yep, and I messed it up. There you go. It's slipped off, so you got to start again because you want a perfect bead there. You don't want it to hit the sides. So when that happens, you got to clean it again and re-oil and try again. Hopefully we got it here this time. When you're first starting this hobby, don't be surprised if you have to redo this thing 15, 20 times. It is quite challenging. But you get the hang of it. And now we can drop it into the hole there. All right, now we got to do the same thing on the other side. You see, we're just popping up that little spring, picking up the jewel and the jewel hole with some Rodico. A little bit of oil again. Get the hang of this. I have to figure out a way to show you this closer. It's very difficult. I like to have my face right on top of it with the loop. Maybe I'll learn how to do this under the microscope. Then we can just carefully drop it back in. And then this is the Inca block shock spring. Basically, it allows it to give if you drop the watch. You have less chances of breaking the pivot. So we gave it a full wind here. And I'm not going to regulate it right away, but I'm curious to see if there's any change on the Timegrapher, and there is. So you see the amplitude is 282 degrees versus 167, so that's great. The beat error is a little bit better. It's losing 32 seconds a day now, but we're going to need to leave it for 24 hours. Now we can, 24 hours later, assemble the rest of the watch, and we'll calibrate it and regulate it before we case it up. But might as well keep going here. The hour wheel can go on. And then the dial washer, very important part. And then this dial just gets press fit in place here. Like so. And I was about to put the hands on there, but I'm noticing these are a little bit tarnished and there's no loom. Their luminescent material has been removed on these. Not to worry, I think we're just going to restore those hands. I'm using a leather buffing pen to shine those up, and it does a really good job. You get them really, really nice and shiny. So I'm doing the same on the minute hand, as well as the seconds hand there. And then we'll re-loom these hands. So I use this really nice kit. It's from Horotech. This is not an inexpensive kit. Just this thing is like $100, but it's really worth it. If you use cheap loom kits, typically they don't come out really great. It's like gray or something. So this is going to be nice and white. So it's got a couple parts. You can see there's the luminous powder under a black light. And then I really don't need a large amount here. So I'm using my biggest oiler to use as little powder as possible. And then a little bit of the binder there, or the glue. And I put a little bit too much there, so I'm having to add a bit more powder. So you want the right consistency. If it's too liquid or too solid, it's just not going to apply properly. And then I notice again, missing a bit of powder there. All right, so now what you have to do here is just kind of paint with an oiler the back of the hands. And the capillary reaction, basically, of the metal and the fluid will pull the liquid into that crack, into that hole there. But you just want the bubble or the liquid to touch. You don't want to touch metal on metal there because you may force some of the liquid to spill on the other side, which we don't want. We just want it to be suspended into that slot there, so it's nice and clean on the other side. So I'm repeating the process here with the hour hand. I need a little bit more, and then you can see the other side looks nice. And we'll give you a closer look once these dry. Now, the other thing I'm noticing is the crown is really worn, and this is not the original Tissot signed crown. So I really don't have any qualms about replacing it, and I do happen to have a Tissot crown into my assortment here. But unfortunately, it's comically large here, so it doesn't fit the design of the case at all. So we can't use it. Also, I'm noticing it's way too loose. It's missing a crown tube here. So that's not really waterproof. But I also have an assortment for that. And then we can do a dry test fit here. And this one looks like it's going to work fine, actually. I'm just going to press it in place and just kind of do a fit test here. And I found a crown that I think will work well with this as well. It's, you know, just a regular silver plain crown. But it works really well with the crown tube because it's got a washer in there, like a rubber gasket. And that helps with waterproofing. And you can see this thing. This thing looks a lot better than the original one. Or at least the one that came with this watch. All right, so now we want to glue the crown tube in place. I'm going to use some metal epoxy. If you're familiar with epoxy, it's two parts. It's a resin and a binder there. And I'm using way too much. You'll see how very little I actually need. But you just have to mix it up. Like so. And then I'm putting a little bit of like an even coat around the part where it's going to get inserted into the case. And this tube is really perfect for it. I'm really glad I had it. And there's special tools that exist to fit those in place, but you know, tweezer and thumb is a good solution. There we go. And now what we have to do is we have to wipe off some of the excess here on the epoxy, because if you wait until it dries, then you'll have to cut it off or scrape it off, which is going to be a big pain. All right, so now we can replace the crown. We'll reuse the stem itself because it's designed for that specific movement. But we use a pin vise here to hold the stem tightly, and then the crown itself basically just unscrews. It's on threads. And I can try to screw on the other crown, the new crown, but it was a little bit rough there. And then I noticed that the threads themselves had some gunk on there, so I'm just using a wire brush here to try to clean them up enough that I can screw in the new stem. And then again, Rodigo, right? You can use it to pick up any of the loose debris now. It's really a super versatile tool. And then this will screw right in. Like so. Just doing a fit test here. There we go. That's excellent. We were going to have to adjust the length of it probably because we changed the design here a little bit. So I'm using the movement while the movement's in the case, and you can see, yeah, we've added a bit of length there. So we're going to have to trim that stem a little bit. We're using some cutters, and I cut off basically one thread, and I'm using some files to just clean up the edges here and remove any burrs because that's steel. And the crown is brass, I believe, so you could easily mess up the threads if you don't clean them up. All right, so let's try this again. I mean, we're closer, but we're not quite there. So we have to basically trim a little bit more off. And this is what a big part of watchmaking is, doing very tiny adjustments, one at a time, testing, readjusting until it's perfect. Everything has to be as perfect as we can get it. Like this. See, this is right up against the case. Very happy with this. And then to fix it, you know, a little bit more permanently in place, we're going to use some Loctite, which is a thread locker, essentially. It's used in many different industries, like automotives. You know, there's different types of Loctite. This is kind of like a milder one where it's going to make sure that the threads, you know, you don't unscrew the crown when you're trying to, you know, change the time there. It's going to stay in place, but, you know, it'll make it possible to remove the crown if ever we need to. You just heat it up a little bit and then it's going to unscrew. All right, so we can put on the dial here. And I noticed I had this part on my bench here. Again, the washer, very important. I had to do this a couple times, actually, while I was testing the new crown there. So, all right, so now we can put the movement ring back in place with those two case clamps. There's one of the screws. And the second one. Again, that's just to make sure that nothing's wobbling about inside the case, because the movement itself is quite a bit smaller than the case. Which is very, you know, common on vintage and modern watches for that matter. And now we can take a look at those hands. They've had about 24 hours to dry. And you can see the other side. We'll take a closer look here. Those hands are nicely restored. They're nice and shiny. And the loom is right where we want it, in all the right places. And there's no overspill or anything. So I'm very happy about that. And then we can put on the hour hand here first. You can put it on any hour there. And in fact, when it's the first one you put on, you can put it anywhere and then just turn the crown to adjust it. But I don't know. I like to do things right. So now it's at 12 and it's pressed in place. And then the next one to go on is going to be the minute hand. Just like so. All right, and last but not least is the seconds hand there, and that's basically sitting on a tiny pivot. So I'm just going to carefully push that in place. You really don't want a lot of force on here, just enough that it won't come off. And I'm testing here to make sure none of the hands are interfering with one another, and it looks like everything's fine. So that's good. All right, so before we case it up, we got to do a final regulation here because there's no case back, so we got to do it all now. Minus 17 seconds a day. The amplitude is improved to 289 degrees, and the beat error is a little bit off there. So it's like swinging more to one side than the other on the balance wheel. So we're going to start with the beat error. And we move this big lever here, which is what the stud is attached to, where the hairspring is actually attached to on the balance bridge there. And then right away, this never happens, but right away I got it like 100%. See, 0.0 just in one adjustment. Yeah, I'm lucky there because normally you have to do it a couple times. And now basically after the beat error is done, I can chase the rate. And best I could do is, you know, around minus 2 seconds per day. And then that's on a dial side down. Dial side up, it's actually gaining about 3 seconds, so it evens out. And you can never get mechanical watches to run perfectly in real time anyway, so this is going to keep excellent time. This is exciting. We get to see like the final watch, the finished watch very soon. So just putting on the crown and stem here. And I'm testing the operation to make sure everything works well. Which it does. And using a little bit of air to make sure there's no dust particles left inside, because I ain't opening this thing again. not until I have a special tool to remove those crystals. I don't encounter these very often, so in fact this is the first one I've had like this. All right, so now we can press this in place. And even though we're using plastic dies here, I'm still going to put a bit of a silicone sheet to make sure that it doesn't scratch up the crystal, because it is plastic. So even plastic on plastic can cause scratches. So we just press it in place. Sometimes they click in place. In this case, I just kind of felt it set all the way down there. You get a feel for it. But this tool is really, really handy because look at this. Now, all that's left to do, this is a beautiful watch, by the way, is I've chosen this nice strap here, which has got like a retro vintage vibe to it with the big amber stitching. And the side with the buckle goes on the top of the watch, in case you're wondering. And we can fit that in place with our spring bar tool. And we'll do the other side as well. All right, and we are done. Look at the finished watch. I think this thing came out really, really nice. I'm really happy with it. I want to say thank you for watching. I really appreciate all of the engagement. If you like this type of content, please consider liking the video and subscribing. This really helps us content creators with the YouTube algorithm. And so I want to say thank you, and we look forward to see you on the next one. Cheers.